Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Now, you may know that here at youtube.com/Cephalopocalypse, we have a bit of an ongoing quest, and that quest is to create the perfect archer. I've probably done 10 or 15 archer build guides at this point, all of them emphasizing strong things about different combinations of character classes, but one that I actually have not covered is just a straight-up fighter archer, which is surprisingly very high in the rankings of the most powerful archers available. The great thing about this character is you get all of the inherent strengths of fighter, the reliability, sustainability, large numbers of attacks, incredible ease of play and precision and simplicity of build, alongside archery, which is inherently one of the most powerful strategies in Baldur's Gate 3. You get the best fighting style, you get one of the best feats in the game, exclusive to archers, and you get all of the inherent strengths of being a ranged character. You get to fight at range, you get to use dexterity, the best attribute. So all of those things go together to create a character that brings in the incredible power of the fighter chassis just by itself, having some of the best abilities and best based stats of any class in the game, alongside one of the most powerful strategies in the game, and merge the two together. You also get a character that gets a bunch of its own unique and very cool tricks, and in particular, this build is designed to use both weapon attacks and spellcasting, the way you might imagine an Eldritch Knight wants to do, to actually have a Gish character, a character that uses both weapons and spells, as part of its kit, something that is not typically available for Eldritch Knights, but because we're playing an archer, we get to do that very easily. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Tadu Rodriguez for the €10 donation, Sharek for the $20, Janes84 for the 500 rupees, and Spencer Rogers for the $20 donation, as well as Tombstone Tunes and Gonzalo Mena Fuenzalida for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support, and it really does mean a lot. Alright, let's get building this archer. I'm using Lae'zel as the example character here, both because she's the fighter of the party, and also because Githyanki is actually an excellent choice for this build. Not only do you get Enhanced Leap and Misty Step, which can help you be very mobile, moving around the battlefield is very useful for an archer, you also get Githyanki's Astral Knowledge, which will allow you to gain proficiency in all dexterity skills. As an archery build, we're going to be maxing out our dexterity, and fighter normally doesn't get stealth or sleight of hand, so Astral Knowledge can let you pick those up. If you're building this as a custom character, you could also consider the Urchin background to gain stealth and sleight of hand from your background, but what race you pick is less relevant. Obviously, all of the normal standouts are still very good here. Dwergar's invisibility can be extremely helpful. Wood Elf's movement speed is excellent for this character, but since fighter gets all of its weapon and armor proficiencies inherently, what race you pick is going to have much less impact on this build than it will for most. So Githyanki is what I'd recommend because it's just so good to be able to get those dexterity skills on a dex-based character. For our attribute selection, we're going to drop our strength down to 8 and put all of those points back into dexterity, because of course we want to be attacking with ranged weapons. Then we're going to take 16 constitution. One of the great things about this build is that we get to be extremely resilient, and so even though we're not likely to be, we don't care if we lose concentration. We actually will be concentrating on spells, but we don't care that much if we lose concentration, and we're not that likely to lose concentration. The extra hit points are still just very good for this character because it's so difficult to kill you if you have a decent hit point total with your extremely high AC, mobility, and survivability. One of the draws of this character is just how hard it is to kill. We'll also take 12 wisdom to increase our saving throws, and then we'll put 14 in intelligence. Normally an Eldritch Knight doesn't care about their intelligence at all, but this build will actually have a particular use for it on into the later game, and so we're going to put points in it now and then probably increase it later in order to maximize our damage as well as the effectiveness of our spells. In the early game though, don't cast spells that require your intelligence, it just won't be high enough to succeed. For our skill selection here, like I said, if you can get sleight of hand and stealth either from astral knowledge or from your background, that's very good. Other than that, though, your skill selection mostly doesn't matter, but you might as well put the point into perception just because it's very good to have that. Acrobatics is less relevant, I find, typically. Finally, for our fighting style, we are, of course, taking archery fighting style, and that's one of the great things about being an archer, is that archery fighting style is just such an incredibly powerful ability, +2 bonus to your ranged attacks. Starting at level 1 makes this character extremely reliable, and so that's just one of the main draws to being an archer, is access to this fighting style. We get it at level 1, and that's awesome. No other decisions to make at level 1 though, so let's move on to level 2. And at level 2 we get access to Action Surge, which of course is one of the best class abilities in the entire game, giving us an extra attack at this level in most combats already, which is of course very good. Most characters have to wait until level 5 to get a second attack. Fighters get it at level 2, and then when we do get extra attacks, we're going to get even more of them thanks to Action Surge. We don't have to make any choices though, so let's move on to level 3. And then at Fighter level 3, we're going to take Eldritch Knight. There's a couple reasons for this, and one of them will come up later on down the line, but the great thing about Eldritch Knight is that inherently it's just so hard to kill Eldritch Knights. And the great thing about ranged characters in Baldur's Gate is that you're very likely to win initiative because you have high dexterity, and you're very likely to be far away from enemies because you're ranged. So if you have a character that is hard to kill, ranged, wins initiative, it is very, very hard to actually lose the game, even on honor mode, because you will always be able to leave bad situations. It's almost impossible for an Eldritch Knight to die in one round unless they fail a saving throw against usually a wisdom targeting save that takes them out of the fight immediately. But against weapon attacks, you have so many and such powerful defensive options, you should be able to get out pretty much always, and your high mobility and the fact that you start far back from enemies and can fight away from enemies makes it extremely difficult for you to be killed. To play into that theme, the spells that we're going to select, of course, are Shield, which gives us an incredible defensive option with dexterity, medium armor, shields, because we can wear a shield and use a bow at the same time, and the shield spell, we will have armor easily in the mid-30s, which will make it very hard for us to actually take damage from enemies. And then for our second spell, we're just going to grab Magic Missile. Having the option to do 100% guaranteed damage is very useful. There's some encounters that Magic Missile more or less just solves on its own in the early game, or makes significantly easier during Act 1. So having access to Magic Missile just gives you a lot of options that you don't have otherwise. Mostly your spell slots at this point are going to be used for Shield to prevent incoming attacks if that happens, but it's great to have the backup option. We also get an expanded spell slot, and here it's going to depend a little bit on what your party has access to elsewhere. If you have Long Strider and Enhanced Leap elsewhere in your party, then you don't need to take them on the Eldritch Knight, but of course you can pick up Long Strider for the Eldritch Knight. Increasing your movement speed by 10 feet is incredibly valuable for a ranged character, plays into our theme of survivability and mobility, and this spell is free. It's a ritual spell, so you can cast it on your whole party every day, lasts all day, just gives you a huge bonus for the entire day. The really interesting thing is our cantrip selection, because Eldritch Knight actually has a bunch of uses for cantrips that you might not otherwise see selected in the game. Now, of course, the normally excellent cantrips are still excellent. Things like Minor Illusion or Mage Hand still do very good for you, but Eldritch Knight gets to use two cantrips that you don't see very often in very interesting ways. One of them is Blade Ward, which I'm a big fan of just in general, but for Eldritch Knights is particularly good because of our War Magic class feature at level 7. We basically can get a free Blade Ward every turn, and I'll talk about how that works later on. And when you have a free Blade Ward every turn, plus shield, 30 AC, tons of hit points and so on, you're very hard to kill, obviously. And the second, and I know this is going to make people mad in the comments, is True Strike. You actually will have a good use for True Strike later on down the line with this build, and while True Strike itself is not super powerful, and you can easily replace this with Minor Illusion, Mage Hand, Ray of Frost, or Ray of Fire, any of those would be great picks. Light, just really any utility spell would be excellent. It's kind of fun that this build will actually get a good use for True Strike, so rather than taking it as a meme just to annoy people in the comments, we're taking it here because it's actually not terrible. Early game though, don't use it, just make another attack instead. At level 4, we get access to our first feat, and the feat that we are going to take, like with every other archery build, basically, is going to be Sharpshooter. Sharpshooter is the other major draw to an archery playstyle in general, because not only do we get a ton of additional damage, which scales with the number of attacks we're making, and remember we have Action Surge, we're going to get extra attack next level, so we'll be making a lot of attacks. This can be plus 40 damage in the opening round of combat. It also combines extremely well with archery fighting style to mitigate the hit chance penalty that Sharpshooter causes you to suffer. As always with this feat, it is typically good to just leave it on all the time. You will almost always increase your average damage, but do remember that you can turn it off if you just need a small amount of damage on an enemy, maybe they're at very low health, or if you have extremely low hit chance against them. Typically, if your listed hit chance is 30% or lower, turn off Sharpshooter because that will increase your average damage, but for the most part you can just leave this on all of the time. We also get to take another spell, and since this has to be an evocation or abjuration spell, there's not a lot here that we actually want. Of course, we'll be wearing armor, so mage armor doesn't do much for us, and our evocation spells are not going to be very good because we will not have the intelligence to support them. Enemies will pass their saving throws, but we do actually have a use for 2 of these spells, so it's kind of a choice between, do you want to be able to just light a bunch of fires, set freezing surfaces and so on with Chromatic Orb, just great utility, or do you want to have something you can concentrate on all day? Being able to concentrate on a spell all day is one of the great things about Eldritch Knight. You have con save proficiency, you have great constitution, so you're going to be able to maintain concentration on these spells, and you'll also very rarely actually get hit. So even something like Protection from Evil and Good can be worth the spell slot just to buff an ally all day, since you can just freely concentrate on it. And of course there are other effects that want you to be concentrating on a spell, so just having something you can concentrate on is pretty good. We don't need to replace a spell at this point because we want to keep all 3 of these, so we definitely don't want to replace any of them. And let's go to level 5. And at fighter level 5, we get extra attack, as well as, if we're a Githyanki, Misty Step, which is great, because Misty Step's mobility is super important for archers. Extra attack obviously just doubles the damage output of this character, and is especially good for fighters, since you can use the full benefit of extra attack with your action surge, so you just get to increase the number of attacks you're doing dramatically. At this point we could replace a spell, but again our spell selection is perfect. You know, we made all the right decisions so far, so we don't need to change any of them. But if you're finding you're not using something, of course you can feel free to swap it out. But for the most part, you're just going to be going straight to level 6. At fighter level 6, we get a second feat, which is of course excellent, because that is going to let us add 2 points to our dexterity to increase our hit chance and damage even more. If you have already found a lot of items that increase your chance to hit and damage, you might consider grabbing Alert instead, especially if you're finding you're losing initiative. Alert is never wrong to pick on honor mode, so it's definitely something you can grab at fighter level 6, but since we're a dexterity build, it is less important for this build, so we can pick up 2 points in dexterity, and just make sure that we are always actually landing our attacks and doing as much damage as possible. Again, we don't have access to higher level spells yet, so our spell selection is still exactly where we want it, and we can go straight to level 8. I mean, level 7, of course. And at fighter level 7, as an Eldritch Knight, we get access to the War Magic class feature. Now, War Magic is usually a pretty bad class feature. It says after you cast a cantrip, you can make a weapon attack using a bonus action. Normally, this isn't a particularly good deal. There's no cantrip you would like to cast rather than making several attacks with your weapon, especially because your weapon is so good. So, War Magic usually, for Eldritch Knight, sees very little use. However, there is a way to gain some benefit out of this, and that is on Honor Mode with hasted actions or Bloodlust actions. Those actions normally only give you one attack. So if you use War Magic to cast a spell and then make an attack as a bonus action, you've broken even on attacks but have gotten a free cantrip. Using this trick, if you have haste from an ally or bloodlust from killing enemies, you can maintain constant Blade Ward on yourself. You can also use True Strike to just gain free advantage on one attack per turn, which is why True Strike is actually kind of cool for this character. Obviously, advantage on one attack per turn isn't a tremendously powerful ability, but the fact that it's basically free means that you just are even more reliable at landing your sharpshooter attacks than any other character, which is very valuable. Sharpshooter attacks do a lot of damage, so gaining advantage on them. You probably start fights with advantage if you're hiding, especially if you manage to get stealth proficiency, so you get your first attack with advantage, and then you get one more attack with advantage. That's pretty good for your accuracy, given that you have to do no work for it, and you also get damage resistance against all forms of physical damage permanently for free because of Blade Ward, making your character incredibly difficult to kill. So War Magic combines extremely well with Haste or Bloodlust to effectively give you free cantrip casts every single turn, allowing you to actually use this feature to gain significant bonuses. For our spell selection at this level, we've finally gotten access to level 2 spells. Unfortunately, the level 2 evocation or abjuration spells are not amazing for us at this stage, but we can pick up utility spells like Arcane Lock. Shatter isn't terrible. There are some cases where you might want Shatter. There's some things that are vulnerable to thunder damage, so you can grab that, or you can go back for earlier leveled spells. I would probably pick up something like Arcane Lock and Shatter, because those will have cool uses throughout the game, but honestly, these spell selections don't matter very much. But at level 8, when we get to replace our selected level 2 spells, we can't do that yet, as you can see here. When we get to replace these spells with spells from any school of magic, they will become incredibly powerful. At level 8, we get a second feat, and also get to both take a spell and replace a spell. So for our second feat, we're just going to go ahead and max out our dexterity. Obviously, we want to be hitting our arrow attacks as much as possible, so maximizing our dexterity is very important. For our expanded spell, we have a bunch of level 2 options that are really good for this character, but the one that I'm going to recommend is another spell that you really don't see used that often, but is actually very good for Eldritch Knights, and that is Magic Weapon. Magic Weapon just gives you +1 to your attack and damage rolls with your weapon. It stacks with the weapon's normal enchantment and so on. But the issue is that it is a day-long concentration spell, so most spellcasters will have things that they'd rather be concentrating on than Magic Weapon. The Eldritch Knight doesn't, and is also very good at maintaining concentration on spells, so can pick up a Magic Weapon, concentrate it on it all day, and get this quite powerful bonus from the Magic Weapon spell that is actually quite difficult to access in the game, because you're usually giving up a very important resource, a spellcaster's concentration, to get it. With the Eldritch Knight, you're not giving up an important resource, so you can have Magic Weapon running permanently, effectively for free. We'll also replace one of the spells that we took at the previous level with Misty Step, because even if we have the once per day Misty Step is just too good to pass up on, and we absolutely want to make sure that we have it as a known spell so that we can escape if we get into bad situations. Being able to have Magic Weapon running all the time is one of the cool advantages that this character gets, one of the ways we actually get to use our Eldritch Knight spellcasting in a powerful way. I will say, if you're doing the True Strike thing, though, do keep in mind that True Strike is also concentration, so if you cast True Strike, it will cancel your Magic Weapon, so don't use True Strike in combat unless you are okay with losing Magic Weapon or having been concentrating on it. At fighter level 9, we get access to the Indomitable class feature, which is very good for us because basically the only thing that is that we are in any danger of at all is failing a wisdom saving throw and becoming frightened or stunned or charmed or something along those lines. Indomitable allowing us to reroll our saves patches the only weakness of this class and makes it extremely resilient to anything that the enemies can throw at you. This combined with any increases to our saving throws will make this character basically unkillable in any normal circumstance throughout the game. You will be far away from enemies, super high AC, going first so you'll be able to kill important targets, mobile, tanky, and have indomitable rerolls on your important saving throws, so almost nothing that enemies can do will ever affect you. We'll also go ahead and just replace our other spell here because we can actually benefit from a spell that you wouldn't think would be good for this character, but in a level you'll see why it actually is, and that is Hold Person. Eldritch Knight normally does not want spells that have saving throws. Hold Person allows enemies to roll a saving throw, and our save DCs are pretty low because our intelligence is fairly low, but at character level 10, we get access to the Eldritch Strike passive. This is very good for us for a bunch of reasons, but one of them is that when we're hasted, we can hit an enemy with this, give them disadvantage on a saving throw against Hold Person, and then hit them with Hold Person. Even with very low save DCs, though we can boost these with items or anything along those lines, we can boost our save DCs with items to make this a little more reliable. But even with a very low save DC, enemies with disadvantage on their saving throws actually fail pretty reliably. With only 16 intelligence, which we'll have by the end of the game, and Eldritch Strike, you are significantly more likely to cause an enemy to fail a save than a normal caster with 20 intelligence and no disadvantage. I think you're something like 20% more likely depending on the enemy. And so that is a pretty huge advantage, which can allow you to land powerful control spells for free. Of course, you can improve this even further using arcane acuity stacking and stuff like that, but even just at base, the Eldritch Knight is surprisingly good at landing crowd control spells after you get Eldritch Strike. Eldritch Strike also has a very cool synergy with a certain item that we'll talk about when we get to items, but that is very, very powerful for us and will increase our damage significantly. We also get another cantrip here, so we're just going to pick up any utility cantrip that we think we might need at this stage. Minor Illusion is always good, though of course your party should have access to this beforehand, but we'll just pick that up here just so you have an extra copy, I guess, or Mage Hand to throw potions if you want. Then we can pick up another level 2 spell, so let's go ahead and get Arcane Lockback, because there are some late game encounters that you can cheese with this, so might as well have access to it. None of these others are very important for us. Fighter level 11, we get a third attack, so now we can make 6 attacks in the opening round of combat by attacking and then action surging, and then if we're hasted or bloodlusted, we can cast cantrips and continue to make attacks with our bonus actions, so we very regularly get 7 or 8 attacks in the opening round of combat, all of which are doing plus 10 damage from Sharpshooter, great damage from our bow, great damage from our additional damage features, and so you can very easily kill stuff very, very quickly. We get another spell. It doesn't really matter what we pick here, but you can replace the spell that we just selected potentially with something that you might find useful. There's a lot of utility spells that you can pick up, like Invisibility. Even going back for Fog Cloud can be very helpful. This has no saving throw and blinds anything within it. If you have Dark Vision, you can see into it and shoot them with advantage. So Fog Cloud is very helpful just for being a no-save blind, especially for some late-game enemies that can't move. So I might just go ahead and pick that up, but other than that, what spell you pick at this stage mostly won't matter. And finally, at Fighter level 12, we get an additional feat, and we're actually just going to take an ability score improvement here and boost our intelligence up even further. This makes our Hold Persons more likely to land with Eldritch Strike, and also is going to increase our damage, because we will be using our intelligence for damage. Though, of course, there are lots of other good options here if you if you aren't using that particular item synergy or aren't using hold person, you can instead take one of any number of other great options. Mobile is very good just for increasing your movement speed. Alert, of course, is always excellent and really good for any honor mode, any possible honor mode build. You could take Athlete here by dropping, if you want to respec and lower your dexterity by 1, you can pick up Athlete and just give yourself a little more jump distance. All of those are great options that can really boost your character significantly. For items for this character, there's actually not much specific that you need. Though, of course, like every archer, you're going to want a good bow. As usual, the two best bows are either the Titan String Bow plus an Elixir of Cloud Giant Strength to do as much damage as possible by adding your strength to your damage, or the Deadshot so you hit more often and critically hit more often. I will say that this build, I tend to favor the Deadshot a little more in general, but for this build in particular, the Deadshot is better because you really would prefer to be using a Bloodlust Elixir on this build. This character uses hasted and bloodlusted actions better than just about every other character because they let you get that free cantrip cast every round. And so that is a pretty strong incentive for wanting to use an Elixir of Bloodlust for fights where you don't have haste available, or just to make sure that you have both. Either of those bows can work, though. You also want this particular item, the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. This goes, when you inflict a condition, gain Arcane Synergy for 2 rounds. Arcane Synergy is weapon attacks, which obviously we're doing a lot of, deal additional damage equal to the affected entity's spellcasting ability modifier. The affected entity in this case is us. So that's going to deal additional damage equal to our intelligence bonus, which in this case is +3. And if every one of our attacks does 3 extra damage, that's a pretty significant boost over the course of the game, given the sheer number of attacks that we're making. And it's totally free to trigger this because every single attack we make triggers Eldritch Strike, which is a condition, so we gain Arcane Synergy basically for free. Before you get Eldritch Strike, there's also lots of other ways to trigger this. You can use toxins, you can use poisons, you can use any weapon that triggers a condition. Basically any condition counts, so it's fairly easy to trigger the Diadem of Arcane Synergy, but Eldritch Knight also just gets to trigger this completely for free with Eldritch Strike, so you gain the benefits of Arcane Synergy. You can even emphasize that even further. Using an item like the Gloves of Dexterity, or just by increasing your intelligence with Ethel's Hair or the Mirror of Loss, you can take higher intelligence. Any increased intelligence that you get will add to your damage as well. So you could replace whatever your gloves are with the Gloves of Dexterity and max intelligence instead of dexterity to really maximize the Arcane Synergy. That would also let you even more reliably land your spells and even potentially use some combat cantrips, which is pretty nice as well. If you go that route, in fact, you could actually swap to the Ring of Arcane Synergy, because if you have maxed intelligence, you can probably hit with a cantrip to gain Arcane Synergy damage and use a different helmet, potentially the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, which would let you land your spells even more reliably. You also, of course, are going to want an armor that has an uncapped dexterity modifier, medium armor with uncapped dexterity modifier, like the Armor of Agility. Other than armors that just increase your dex or your initiative, this will just give you incredibly high AC. Starting with the Armor of Agility and just a normal shield that gives you +2, you have 24 AC, which you can increase to 29 with shield. You can increase that further with any effects that increase it, especially since you will almost always have haste. You'll probably be sitting at 26 AC by default with the ability to increase it by up to 5 if you need to. And all of those together work extremely powerfully to make your character even more dangerous. Anything that increases your ability to survive as well is good. Things that boost your saving throws. Put that on the wrong character, but things like the Cloak of Protection that just give you increased saving throws are very valuable for this character as well, just to make sure that you can use your Indomitable ability and don't run into the one situation where this character can actually die, and of course it boosts your armor class even further. The other thing is the main combo for this character. I will show you how that works. So when you have a hasted action, Let's go ahead and just drink that and enter turn-based mode. When you have a hasted action and a bonus action, what you want to do in honor mode is make one attack, which will use your main action, and then cast a cantrip to trigger our arcane synergy to trigger your war magic passive, or to trigger your war magic passive. Then you can continue to make your attacks with your remaining actions, with your remaining extra attack actions, and you'll be able to make another attack as a bonus action. So you see we got 4 attacks and a cantrip cast there, which is more than any other character would be able to get, because we made our first attack. The reason you have to do it in that order is if you cast the spell first, it will eat your full action, and you'll only be able to make one attack. I've seen it work both ways, so I'm not sure if this is 100% consistent or if the game is behaving a little bit oddly, but for safety's sake, just make a single attack first, then cast a cantrip, then make the remainder of your attacks, and if you do that every turn, you get a free cantrip every turn. Thanks to War Magic, you trigger Arcane Synergy for additional damage from your intelligence, and of course you just get all of the damage from being an archer. Alright, my friends, hope you enjoyed this look at the Eldritch Archer, and of course, if you have, feel free to leave a comment and like the video. Both of those things help me out a ton, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 builds and other strategy game content. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.